Hi, I'm Pastor Len, interim minister here at Shepherd's Heart Church of Brethren Fellowship, and we're continuing our series about various denominational groups that over the years have used the nomenclature of brethren. And of course, the scriptural basis for that, although there are many other New Testament passages that mention the word brethren, would come from Luke 8:21. Speaking of Jesus, and he answered and said unto them, My mother and my brethren are these which hear the word of God and do it. And over the years, there have been many people of various nationalities who have decided that they wanted to be called brethren. Today we're going to talk about a very unique group of brethren called the German Seventh-day Baptist Brethren. And they began to develop in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania in 1728. And at one time, there were many Church of the Brethren congregations that decided not to worship on Sunday, but to worship on Saturday, as some other denominations do today. The original Seventh-day German Baptist Brethren congregation no longer exists as a viable congregation. Instead, it is now a museum site that is administered by the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission, and thousands of people every year visit this site in Lancaster County. Now, you're probably thinking, German Seventh-day Baptist Brethren, well, what did they believe? They have a faith and practice statement that contains 10 different articles, and it's very interesting. Other than Article 10, every article would normally be shared by brethren in the German Baptist or the Church of the Brethren tradition. But in Article 10, it says, we believe in observing the seventh-day Sabbath. And there are several passages that they use quoting the Old and the New Testament. It's interesting, my first personal contact with them was when I was pastoring a congregation in the Southern District, the Church of the Brethren in Pennsylvania. There was a Church of the Brethren chaplain at I think it was sort of an interdenominational nursing home. And he said, Pastor Len, he said, I'm starting to retire and sort of wind things down. And I've been preaching on Saturdays for a Seventh-day German Baptist congregation in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. And would you be willing to preach for these people? And of course, I was already the pastor of a Church of the Brethren congregation, and my first reaction was, well, yes, I would sort of be interested, but I need to check with our church board. And so the church board gave me permission on Saturdays to preach for the German Seventh-day German Baptist Brethren congregation in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. And it was interesting to preach in their church. Their church building that they used was a very traditional style at that time. There was one entrance for men and one entrance for women. And in fact, at one time, there was even a partition in the church so that the pastor had to move his head from this side to talk to the women and move his head to this side to talk to the men. That and one other congregation is the only congregation that still exists today of the Seventh-day German Baptist Brethren. And my wife and I visited their other congregation, which is in Bedford County, Pennsylvania, sort of in a secluded cove area of the Appalachian Mountains. And I remember enjoying a Saturday morning worship service with them. At that time, when I volunteered to preach at the German Seventh-day Baptist Brethren Church, I wasn't too aware that I really had a family connection. And later on, I found out that one of my great, I forget how many great uncles, in 1778 was elected a minister. His name was Peter Lehman. At that time, the brethren in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, where Peter Lehman lived in western Pennsylvania, they were worshiping on Saturday instead of on Sunday. And he was called to be superintendent of the Franklin County group that became known as the Snow Hill Nunnery. Then, of course, some of the Seventh-day Brethren had left Lancaster County, they left Franklin County, and then their congregation in Bedford County at Salemville was begun about 1845. Teresa and I have visited several times a museum in Lancaster County where the Seventh-day German Baptist Brethren had two sets of people. They had celibate brothers and sisters who lived in separate houses, and they also had householders. And as we started studying family history, we discovered that Teresa had a sixth great-grandfather who was named Hans Rudolf Nageli. He had children, but then he decided to join and become a celibate brother after he had children. And when you joined the Seventh-day German Baptist Brethren at Ephrata, Pennsylvania in Lancaster County, you had to adopt a new name. And Teresa's sixth great-grandfather, Hans Rudolf Nageli, became Father Jehoiakim at Ephrata, Pennsylvania. He is buried there in an unmarked grave according to those historical records. So as we've talked about brethren then and now, then in historical times, many brethren did worship on Saturday, but talking about brethren now, only the Seventh-day German Baptist Brethren worship in Franklin County and Bedford County, Pennsylvania. So thank you for tuning in again for this in our series about different groups that call themselves brethren. And again, if you're watching this and you have curiosity and wanting to know more about the brethren, please come to one of our life application classes at 9 a.m. Join us for morning worship Sundays at 10 a.m. or Sunday evening Bible study. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.